introduction. The reality of it is, when I look at the really august board of people that are sitting out here, compared to them, we are actually a little kid. We are a very young company. We've just basically, I think, finished our third year of our first school. So a quick introduction. So you just heard that we are a network of affordable K through 12 schools. And we are specifically targeting those schools towards middle-income families that have very ambitious goals for their child's education, but aren't necessarily able to find a fit for them with the international schools, for example, that they see out there, and the kind of price points that are associated with those international schools. And I'll talk to you about this. We have a platform that we call the Roadmap to My Dreams. That is what sort of differentiates us, in terms of what we are actually offering them. One thing that we offer is basically end-to-end accountability for the schools that we build. We do actually go with partners in terms of funding the schools and the growth of the company and the network of schools. But we do take accountability and hold ourselves responsible for everything that goes into a school, whether it's the hardware or the software. Whether it's just the buildings, whether it's the systems, the processes, the people, the training, everything essentially is something that comes from Global Discovery Academy. At this point in time, we have about 7 schools in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. For this academic year, we are actually in the process of setting up several more schools for the next academic year, and you will see some announcements around that in the near future. At this point in time, again, like I said, very young school, so no Oscars or Nobel Prize winners or Grammy-winning alumni yet, but that is something that if we do things right, we do hope to actually change. So I'm just going to quickly talk about this platform that I talked to you about, Roadmap to My Dreams. It sort of very much follows a medical metaphor. In a medical situation, you would have a doctor sort of diagnosing a patient, designing some sort of an intervention around whatever it is that can be improved or optimized with you. And then the last part of it is that there's a monitoring. There's monitoring that happens on an ongoing basis with you. It's very similar to what we hope to do. The goal over here of the school is to make sure that every child plays to his or her strengths for the span of their life. And we want to make sure that, first of all, that the child actually learns what those strengths are and learns them as young as possible. So that's where the diagnosis part comes in. The second part is the intervention, where we'd like to actually bring in, experience and exposure into the classroom that would help to sort of nurture that child's interest or the child's dominant strengths. And then we want to make sure that we are monitoring that child's growth on an ongoing basis. So when we sort of plot a trajectory and a course and a path for that child, we want to make sure that the child is actually developing along that trajectory the way that we expected that child to. And if the child isn't, and children are, they change over time. As they grow, the child shows a certain set of qualities in the first standard, which may be completely different in the fourth standard. Happens all the time. Point is, we want to catch it when that happens, and we do want to sort of course correct when course correction is the requirement of the hour. And so that is where the monitoring comes into the picture. So those are 3 things that sort of go hand in hand with each other. How we make that happen is sort of by producing a lot of intellectual property within the company. We do have a network of schools, like I said, that we set up. But supporting that network of schools is my team. I have a team that basically builds the Global Discovery Academy or GDA product, which includes the most visible part of our schools, obviously, the building. We have a learning space design team, which includes not just architects and interior designers, but also people that know what it means to have a learning space, a space that is actually a teacher too. So if, for example, to explain that, if you've ever been to a children's museum, most children's museums, at least the ones that I've been to in the US, for example, are learning spaces. Anything that the child touches over there or experiences over there in some way, shape or form teaches the child about something, gives the child some sort of unique experience which might not be possible in the real world. So that's one of the things that the learning space design does, and we actively are working on improving the learning space design of our schools every day. In addition to that, we've got a technology team, of course. Now, technology at Global Discovery Academy sort of falls into 3 major tiers. One is we'd like to manage our network of schools very, very, as smoothly as possible. So that means, everything from having a good ERP system, a good customer relationship management system that helps us to talk regularly with the parents, having a good knowledge management system that helps us to sort of, manage the pedagogy that we create and administer it in the right way. And of course, technology is also something that, so technology that we use to manage our schools, technology that we use to help us to teach, so, instructional technology, but also technology that we actually teach. So we've just, we've just finished a summer program this last summer where we taught our children how to do things like programming on Android phones, for example. There were 4th and 5th standard kids that built tiny apps that, you press a button and a cat says meow. It's silly, but you'd be surprised about how proud the parents were at the end of the day when they saw that child's app and loaded up on their phone, because they were showing each other that like it was literally, some sort of a Nobel Prize winning invention. And there's also technology that we use to help us to teach. So one thing that we've seen is that children are at their most creative when they are children. The issue that they have is that creativity more often than not just stays in their head. And that is where, helping them to actually prototype those ideas in their head is where I think educational technology is going to go next. And we are actually working on sort of building a capability for children to prototype within the schools on a variety of things that they might actually concept out. The other thing that we do a lot of is pedagogy. So we do have, of course, the basic layer of pedagogy that we have, which basically, sort of conforms to the CBSE syllabus and, the CBSE way of teaching. But on top of that, we've got sort of a separate layer of remediation where we will have, a very choreographed experience, classroom experience that is designed and sort of deployed in all of our schools by a central group of pedagogy experts. And that really helps to get across some very tough or very foundational topics to students that would otherwise have been a massive challenge for the teacher in the classroom. So that's essentially how the innovation engine works at GDA and how we actually make that happen. I know I was asked to talk about the growth challenges, so here are some of them. So first and foremost, and I'd rate this as number one, is just teacher quality. The places that we set up shop in aren't usually the ones which you would consider as being the easiest to recruit in. Even for, for the most mundane of tasks, or most mundane of jobs. To think about, recruiting for teachers over there is a massive undertaking. Usually we are in, we set up shop in like tier 3, 4, 5, 6 cities. And it's always been a problem for us. And so more often than not, and I think, we should probably talk about your teacher training institute, because I think you're going to be my new best friend, because we think that there's a lot that we can do in terms of just bringing in talented people and then developing them in-house. There is a chain of schools in the US called Rocket Ship Education. I don't know if any of you have heard about them, but Rocket Ship Education have a really good formula for teacher education, and I'll just show you, the way, I don't know if you can see it over here, but essentially it's a multi-stage process for developing teachers. The first is, of course, you want to recruit right. So there's a pretty involved process in terms of recruiting. Over here, you aren't recruiting for experience or even for education. Of course, the government does require us to have a certain level of, teacher education or teacher qualifications in place. But the most important thing that you're looking for over here is orientation, attitude, ability, rather than, a historical track record that points to where this person's coming from. The other thing is, of course, initial training. So there's some pretty heavy-duty initial training that happens when a teacher is brought on board. That's followed by a lot of peer training that happens in terms of performance evaluation and feedback that every teacher gets, especially the junior teachers get from the more experienced or senior teachers. There's a rewards and recognition system that's tied very tightly to that, to sort of the performance evaluation and the feedback system that we talked about. So the whole idea is that, you do want to incentivize these teachers to do well and to point them in the right direction and incentivize them right. The other thing is, of course, ongoing professional development. So it's not like, you do, a month of teacher training in the beginning of the year and then walk away. Because what inevitably happens is you've got a really galvanized teacher force at the beginning of the year, which as the year wears on, you'll just see sort of a graph of enthusiasm that jumps up and then over the year just goes straight downwards. So you don't want that. You want this to be sort of a drip irrigation system where you're regularly administering, small doses of expertise, experience, and moreover, just, a little bit of sort of pats on the backs and just galvanizing the workforce to keep going. That really I found is a lot more helpful. And last but not the least is, of course, making sure that the teacher can actually see a career track at Global Discovery Academy. So it's, more often than not, a lot of teachers that I've spoken to would say that, well, I'm a teacher now, 10 years from now I'll be a teacher, and 20 years from now I'll be a teacher, and guess what, I'll be 30 years from now, I will be a teacher. And that is what we want to avoid. We want to avoid that feeling of having hit a ceiling and there's no way to go from here, because there's few things that are more frustrating than that. So there's literally 5, 6, 7, 10 different directions that we sort of plot for teachers in terms of their career trajectories. They could actually come into my team, my product development team, and be pedagogy experts or learning space designers. They could actually become, school administrators. They could go to a different geography if they so wished, because again, like I said, it's a network of schools, so that's one of the advantages that you can offer your teachers. So these are some of the things that we sort of are working on to actually help us with the teacher quality issue. The second thing is just the product unpacking. When I say product over here, it's first and foremost, of course, you've got to build a building. So that is the that's the basic issue you're going to face. You're going to have a lot of unevenness in terms of just construction capabilities in different geographies. And if you've seen the first slide, it isn't an easy building to build, no matter where you are. There's a lot of round walls and pretty complex structures inside, and so just getting the product, the Global Discovery Academy product, unpacked in a new geography is a massive challenge. We've got, again, some very talented and hardworking and very dedicated people that are working very hard to make sure that this is a process that is as seamless and as easy and, more importantly, as qualitatively uniform as possible. Which comes to the operational uniformity. Okay, now you've built a school, you've set up the processes. How do you make sure that everybody actually, sticks to those processes? So that is, again, another challenge that we've had. And so putting in all the right levels of controls is another thing that we've had to do. Last but not the least, you just heard Airway talk about infrastructure. That is a big challenge. We can bring in some amazing technology into a lot of places. If there's no electricity, you're just, it's just a paperweight sitting out there. So that is, the sort of thing that we've always struggled with wherever we've gone. Internet access, electricity, are recurring themes that I've seen in several places, and usually, we do try to the extent possible to sort of get past the local bottlenecks, but more often than not, what that means is we do have to sort of start innovating on more low-tech ways to actually get across the same point or replicate the same experience in our schools. So especially from a pedagogical standpoint, we may have a software that teaches a certain principle of mathematics, which we are now going to have to do in a very offline manner with some very low-cost, sort of tools that we would be using. So those are just some of the things that I've seen. I think at this point, I think I'll hold off till the Q&A, and then we can have a bigger discussion around this. Thank you for listening.